And so what we're going to look at is some text animation features that are a little bit more advanced than what we've covered so far. When we first started learning After Effects, we learned how to do some basic keyframing with some shapes and text. And last week, we learned how to use some special effects. When we were using the special effects, we saw there's a lot of different properties that we can manipulate. And so what we're going to look at today is some more advanced text animation that we can do that only really works with text, but it can do some pretty cool stuff. So that's what we're going to talk about, and we'll make a very simple sort of title animation, and then we'll look at how to put those different compositions together. And in the second part of class, we'll do a credits animation, which will be similar but with more information. So I'm going to make a new composition to get started. I'm just going to right-click on my project window and click New Composition. And I'm going to call this Titles, or just Title, I guess. I'll just have one title. And for the duration, I'm just going to set this to probably start with 10 seconds, but I'll probably make it a little shorter once we figure out how long we want the animation to be. And then for the background color, I'm going to leave the default black. Good morning. Because I do have the sort of black background in my main scene. But actually, I'm going to make it a little bit, we're not actually going to see this color, so I'm going to make it like a dark gray. So that will make the text a little bit more visible, maybe. We'll see. But it doesn't really matter. We're not going to see this background color in the final version of the animation. So now I have my title, and I'm going to add some text and then go over some different ways that we can animate it. And this involves a lot of like little properties inside of our timeline. So it's a little tricky to get at first, but that's why we're going to go over it. So I'm going to just take my type tool and make some type here. And I'll just put in the name of my animation, which is Astronaut Cat. And then this obviously is very small and hard to see, so I'm going to select this and we're going to change the text a little bit. So let's choose a more interesting font. Let's see. Just looking at some of the font examples. I want to find something that kind of looks spacey, I guess. Let's see. You could also download a font from Google Fonts if you have like a font that you like. The previews are pretty small, so it's kind of hard to tell what they're going to look like. Let's see. None of these are really speaking to me, but I guess I'll just have to choose one. Maybe this console one. Maybe that'll be nice. Okay, so let's choose a font. Let's make the font size bigger. We can probably, I don't know why their largest value is 72. We could probably go higher than that. Let's try like 128. It's pretty good. So now we need to make this box a little bit bigger. And let's center our font. And let's do a fill and a stroke, so that way we'll always be able to see it. So let's zoom in a little bit. I'm going to switch these colors actually so we can see it on the background that we have. Okay, and then let's increase the stroke a little bit. Okay, that looks pretty good. I might make the text. Oh, I don't have a bold for this. I might want some wider text, but this font doesn't have a bold setting. see if maybe if we use this one, do we get a bold? That looks okay. I'll just stick with that for now. And then I want to center this on the page. So since I've been kind of like moving it around, what I want to do to center it is I can go back to the properties here and just set the position. So if I want it to be centered on the page, I need to know the size of my composition. So I'm using HD rather than full HD because of the projector resolution. So the HD resolution is, if we look at, we can also just check the composition settings. Actually, I'm on 1920 by 1080 for this one. Did I do that by mistake? Yeah, I shouldn't have done that. Okay, so let's change the composition settings. I should be 1280 by 720. Okay, now the text is really big, so let's make it a little bit smaller. I'll do like 96. Okay. So then to get the center position, we just need half the width and half the height. And you can do that just by typing the math directly into the box. So I can say 1280, which is the width of the composition, and then / or divided by 2. And that'll give me 640. And then I can do 720 divided by 2. And that should be centered, but it's not. I guess is it just 1280 by 720? No, that's not centered either. Let's check my position down here. Huh. The anchor point is 0, 0. Okay, that's weird. Why is it? That's really weird. It says my anchor point is 0, 0, but my text is not on the anchor point. Huh. Okay, that's kind of goofy. Let's see if I can change this anchor point. Okay, something weird is going on, but that's okay. Let's just center it visually. I'll just put it in the middle of the screen. I'll fix that later. And then I'm just going to fit my composition. It's very weird. It says anchor point is 0, 0, but my text is not centered. What if I just put 0, 0 for the position? No, that's not right. Okay, whatever. Let's just move on. Okay, so now we're going to animate the text. And I'm going to make this bottom window a little bit bigger because we're going to have a lot of properties that we want to look at. And so when I open up the layer for the text that I have here, we're going to see there's a text section along with the transform section. And the text section has a source text, so I can change the text at various keyframes and a few other things, but it also has this animate property here. And if I click on the little triangle inside the circle that looks like a play button here, I see a bunch of options. And here I can animate the text rather than just the transform. And so that's kind of that could be a confusing distinction because I can open the transform and here I can move the position and animate the position like we've done in the past with our shapes and our camera and stuff like that. But by using the animate option up here, I can also animate the position, but then I can add extra effects on top of it. So if we want to animate the position alone, we can just use the transform. But if I want to animate the position and then have the ability to change some of the letters and other things and add effects, then we want to use this animate option and go to position here. So when we do that, let's zoom in a little bit. You're going to notice there's like little X's for each of the characters. And we're going to see that we can actually have a much finer level of control over our animation. But we have to, it's a little bit tricky. There's a lot of things that like won't look like they're actually working, so we have to go over how to set this up right. So let's animate the position first. And if we want to add other properties like opacity, you can just add, you can just go to the animate and add any of these properties, rotation or whatever, but it doesn't add them by default because you're going to see there's a lot of extra properties that go along with this. So let's animate our text. Let's just bring it up on the Y axis up to where it's above the window. And so we'll keyframe that. And then let's go out to here. This is probably going to be too long, but just for an example. And let's bring it down into like the bottom third of our scene. And so we're just animating the position. So we can preview that. And that's way too slow. So let's move this guy. Let's do like maybe 4 seconds. Okay, so we've got our text coming in. And it's still pretty slow, but let's leave it there so we can kind of preview different effects that we're about to add. So this is really basic and simple, but what makes this a lot more interesting is this property right here, the range selector. And so we can use the range selector to choose which part of our text we actually animate. So I'm going to click fit here again. Well, I'm still going to need to open this up. So let's go to here, go fit. So we can actually rename this. I'm going to rename this animation position because you can layer, I can add more animations on top of each other as well. But then let's look at this range selector. So the range selector itself has a start, end, and offset. And this has to do with where the animation starts. If I play with the end of the animation, you can see that the range, this selects the range of text that is affected by my position animation. So if I set this to 0, then the animation just doesn't happen. So the range of text that's affected by the animation is 0, essentially. If I set this to 100, then the entire text is affected by the animation. If I set this to something in between, like let's say like 75, now we'll see that only that first section of my animation is affected by the position animation. And so the cat part of it is just completely ignored by the animation. So we can also keyframe this end section. So let's say we want to wait until the astronaut lines up with the cat. I can keyframe the end here, and then I can go to the end here, and I can keyframe this to 100%. So we'll get the astronaut first, and then the cat comes down with it. Notice that the characters for the cat kind of go along like that. So if we wanted just the whole word, we could do other effects as well. So that's a basic idea. Let's take this one off for a second and look at the offset. So the offset will just change. It'll go through all of our characters. So if I set the offset to like -100, that doesn't affect anything. If I set it to 100, that also doesn't affect anything. If I put it in the middle, that's everything. If I put it at like 50%, then we're sort of on the other side. So we could animate the offset. I could do something where the offset is 50% to here, and then we go to 100%. Or actually, let's go to 0 back here. So we get the back end of it, and then the characters go like that. So there's a bunch of different ways that we can kind of play with the range of text to affect the animation. So let's turn that off for a second. And then let's set my N to like 50%. So another thing that we can do is actually change the units that this affects, because you can see that when we do 50%, that A is moving sort of, everything is kind of like on one line, but the A is moving on its own. And that's because we're using a percentage, so it's kind of like in the middle. But if we go into this advanced tab here, we can change the units to index. And then instead of, see how end turned into 6.5? That's what that 75% actually was. But if I change that to 6, then we can select an actual single part of that text. And then I can, you know, increase this to take out the characters that I want to animate in. So if you're working with text and you have a specific number of letters, the index is going to let you target that specific number of letters. You can also change what this index is based on, if it's characters or words or lines. For now, let's just stick with characters because we just have one line. But when we do our credits, we can switch that to words and lines and see what that looks like. We can also set the mode. And so this is kind of like our blending mode. We can do add and subtract. So if I do subtract, it's going to do the opposite of whatever the index is. If I do add, it's going to, you know, add that index. And then there's also a shape, which is fun to play with. So right now, it's just bringing all the letters down at the same rate. That is the square shape. So it's just like one block, essentially. But I can change this to a ramp. Okay, so a ramp is like going, you know, it's like a ramp if you were entering a building. So it goes from bottom to top. So that can be kind of fun. We get this like nice little ramp. It looks a little goofy, but we can actually fix that in a second. So we get this nice little ramp. We can also ramp down. That kind of looks nice, maybe. And it kind of ramps to this like pivot point, which of course we can change. That's still set by our original position animation, which we could play with if we wanted. We can also do a triangle, which is going to have this sort of like bump in the middle, which is kind of fun. Or we can even do round, which is sort of like the triangle, except it's rounded, like a little circle or ellipse. And we can also do smooth, which is kind of like a little bell curve, basically. So that looks kind of cool. Let's go back to ramp down. And another thing that we can use here, we talked about keyframes and easings and stuff like that. We can actually set the easing here. So if I set ease high to 100%, it's going to kind of ease into this animation. If I set the ease low to 100%, it's going to ease out of the animation. So that looks pretty nice, actually. That's kind of interesting. Maybe I'll change my position at the end here to just be 0. So the astronaut will just meet the cat down here. Oh, did I add an extra keyframe by mistake? Let's see. Oh, I guess I need to, I'm going negative, positive. Okay, I guess I didn't set it. Let's set this to 0. And then, okay, that's what I wanted. Is there an extra keyframe in there? I don't, yeah, okay, I had an extra keyframe. Let's delete that one. There we go. Okay. Okay, so now we kind of have this slowly descending into place. That looks kind of fun. I might go back here and move this position even farther up, like maybe like negative 1200, something like that. And it's still kind of slow, but we're just using a slow version. And let's see, we can also randomize. So if I turn the randomizer on, it's going to randomize which characters are being used. And we can randomize the seed as well over time. But that's kind of cool. That gives us a nice little space vibe. If I randomize the seed, or if I change the random seed, it's going to change which of those characters are going. So I could animate that. That could be kind of interesting. If I animate that from 0 to like maybe, let's try like 8. See how that goes. That's kind of cool. It's a little like stilted. It's a little jumpy. Let's increase that number. Let's do like 32. This is probably going to be really crazy. But it's kind of fun. Maybe if we go even crazier, do like 64. Now we kind of lose the original idea, but it's still kind of interesting. Let's turn it off for now because we're also going to add another component that's going to kind of look similar. Okay, so those are all of the various ways that I can play with the advanced settings on that original position animation. And of course, this is just one thing. We can also do opacity. We can also do rotation. There's a lot of other things that we can animate in this style. One last thing that I'm going to add here before we put this into our main animation is we can also add, there's a little button here called add where we can add even further values. So we can add another property that's sort of a sub property. That gets really confusing, so we're not going to do that. But we can also add expressions, and expressions allow you to like code in different things. That's a little more complicated, but there's a couple of built-in things here. We can add another range, so we can have a range within a range, which is kind of fun. But we can also do like a wiggly thing, which is pretty cool. This will just kind of like wiggle our text through the animation. So that's a really easy way to add some of that randomness that we were looking at just a second ago, but it's a little bit more controlled. So if we look at the wiggly selector, there's a mode. Intersect is going to go with what our range we already have, so I'll leave that. Then we have a min and max amount, so that's how much it's going to wiggle. So if I set those to 0, obviously no wiggling will happen. If I set them to like 50 and 0, then we'll see there's just going to be some wiggling at the top. If I set them to 50 and negative 50, we'll get more wiggling below the line as well. So that's kind of fun. Let's leave those at 100 and negative 100. You can also do based on characters or words or lines. You can do wiggles per second. So if I increase this value, we'll get more wiggles. If I do like 10, it'll be very wiggly. And the default is 2. And then we can also randomize this. And we have lock dimensions off. So if I turn lock dimensions on, we'll just get the Y. So we can get a lot of pretty cool effects that way. We can get some of that randomness that we were getting before, but it's a little bit more controlled. It's using this wiggling thing to kind of control the randomness a little bit. Okay, so again, you can add wiggling to not just position, but also opacity. You can add wiggling to rotation. So there's a lot more that you can do just besides the position. We're just using the position as an example. So definitely recommend playing around with all of the different properties and options for these animations. So let's throw this into our into a composition along with our walk cycle. And I'm going to create a new composition to hold both of these so that I can kind of fade one into the next. So I have my title, and then I have this walk cycle, but that's actually just the walk cycle itself. The main composition is the walk cycle plus the background. And so I'll use that one. And so I'll make a new composition. I'll call this final. And I'll put my title in first, and then my main composition here. And I'll move the main composition up here. And so we can see we've got the title. Actually, we're probably going to want the title on top. So let's move the title up there. So we've got our title with our little title animation. And then we've got our walk cycle coming in. And we can do a little opacity fade if we want to, you know, kind of fade things in. So I'll do T for opacity. And I'll set it to 0 here. And then I'll just go up like just a second and set it to 100. And so now we've got our little title, and we fade in our scene. Oh, I forgot to keyframe. Okay, so let's click the keyframe, go to 0, move up to here, and do 100. And then we can do the opposite on our title. I'll hit T here, and I'll keyframe the opacity, and then fade it out. So now we have a new composition that has our walk cycle and our title. And so we fade from one to the other, so I can go back and edit the title, I can go back and edit the walk cycle, and then, you know, it'll update in this composition. Okay, so that's it for our beginning text animation and title sequence. In the second part of class, I'll just go over doing some credits. So it'll be very similar, but we'll be using more text, and so we'll look at animating that text by word or line rather than by character. And then we'll also look at some, you know, different animations that we can do other than just the position. Okay.